Good morning. Today is the 23rd of Teves, the 4th of January. We're up to the 5th reading. Now, in the Wonders, there was no room for the 5th and 6th readings, so we'll get it here. The 5th reading is the continuation of the argument, the debate between Moses and God. And now Moses gives many reasons for why this will not work, why he cannot be the messenger, he cannot be the one who's going to take the people out of Egypt. And during this argument, one might call it, he already made a claim in the 4th reading. He said in chapter 3, verse 13, Moses said to God, I am going to come to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your forefathers has sent me to you. They will ask me, what is his name? What shall I tell him? And then we hear that God gives him a new name. We didn't discuss it in the 4th reading, but that was the first thing. They're going to ask me, what's his name? And there's a very interesting ending at the end. God says to him, he said to him, so you shall say to the Israelites, God, the God of your forefathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name at all times, to be concealed. This is how I am to be recalled for all generations. And this is an unbelievable topic in and of itself. I think that before the Lubavitcher Rebbe, before I read his explanation, I did not understand this verse, which is a very important verse. It's cited a lot. It's one of those verses that's cited as much as probably not as much as the first verse of the Torah, but as the other verses. The meaning in, I just have to say this because it's like a continuation of yesterday. The meaning is that from here we learn that the way that God's name is pronounced is not the way in which it is read. What is the meaning behind this? We hear this a lot. We read Yud Kei Vav Kei, which the Christians call in some Jehovah or something, which is obviously not a correct pronunciation. There's no J in Hebrew, which begs the question: what is a Jew? Because there's no J, so there's no Jerusalem. There's all these things they don't really work in Hebrew. It's a Yud, it's a Y, so you would say however you'd say it. A Jew in Hebrew is a Yehudi. In any case, what does it mean that he is pronounced differently than the way he is written? So he says he's pronounced as Adni. We say Adni. Adni means the name of judgment. It means that God reveals himself in judgment, and yet he is written Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is the name of compassion, of mercy. And what he was saying to him, they're going to ask me what is his name. They're going to be asking, how is it possible that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is the same God that we're supposed to worship now after having suffered so terribly for all these years? How can we connect it back to the patriarchs who served God as the love of loving kindness, the God of Abraham? Isaac had might, but Jacob was compassion. How can we connect it back to the patriarchs? And the answer was, my name is not pronounced the way it is written. Externally, it looks to you like judgment. Internally, and you are yet to see it, this leads to compassion. And that is probably the most difficult part of being alive in this world. That things are not what they seem exactly. They're different. But the most important question is, what is this compassion that he's talking about? And this leads us into the 5th reading. And in the 5th reading, we hear that Moses says, not only will they ask me his name, but chapter 4, verse 1, Moses replied saying, but they will not believe me, nor listen to my voice, for they will say, God did not appear to you. In other words, they're going to say, this God that you talk about, who is the God of compassion, he did not appear to you. It's very hard to believe from within the struggle of being in bondage for 200 years to believe that now suddenly compassion has suddenly come out. But it is. Why? Because God is saying to him, I'm not taking the Jewish people out of the Israelites out of Egypt in order to simply free them from their slavery. I'm taking them out of Egypt in order to give them the Torah. And the Torah is the Torah of compassion. That is the compassion that they're going to receive now. This is what this was all about. Now, we don't have time to go over this. If you were following the morning classes, there was a long series on is exile a punishment? And there we discussed this in great length, this whole idea that the exile in Egypt was a preparation for the giving of the Torah. And we had to explain why this was, why this would be, because it seems like some kind of punishment. But the first thing that is explained in Chassidut about this, Chassidic thinking, is that this was not a punishment. This was a stage of the old revelation of godliness that the patriarchs knew, elevating back to its source, and a new stage descending. And in the interim, it seems like God is missing, or at least God is punishing or judgmental or something like that. And we gave the whole parable of the student sitting in a class, and suddenly his teacher has a new, better way to explain everything, or a whole new thing that he needs to explain. And for a few moments, or even hours, or even days, the teacher is missing in action. He's not there, because he has to rebuild everything that he wants to teach. He has to rethink, how am I going to teach this? And this happens particularly when a student has elevated himself above the current teachings. So Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were able to grasp God at a level that was high enough that a new revelation was needed. And this new revelation was the Torah. And that's the compassion that's being talked about. But in any case, Moses says, they won't believe me, and they won't listen to me. And then God answers to him in verse 8, if they do not believe you, and will not heed the first miraculous sign, the staff becoming a snake, then they will believe the second sign. And if they do not believe even these two signs, and still do not heed your voice, then you shall take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground. The water that you take from the Nile will turn into blood on the dry ground. So God himself says twice, contingencies. They will not believe you. Moses says, inevitably, they will not believe me. God agrees with him to an extent, and he says we have to plan for this contingency, and he plans two contingencies. The first one is the second sign, which is the first sign is the staff becoming a snake. The second sign is now that he's telling him, you shall pour water from the Nile on the ground, it'll turn into blood. So God is accepting that there may be disbelief. So we have three aspects of disbelief here. Disbelief, Moses says, is inevitable, and God says there's two contingent aspects of disbelief that may happen. But at the very end of this reading, the very, very end, not at the very end, at the very end of the sixth reading, something miraculous happens. And it's almost unheard of. In fact, it probably is unheard of. In the end of chapter 4, verse 31, it says, the people believed. And when they heard that God had taken note of the Israelites and that he had observed their misery, they bowed down and prostrated themselves. An amazing thing happened. In spite of what Moses was afraid of, would surely happen, they wouldn't believe him. In spite of what God even planned as contingencies, this didn't happen. They believed him. But remember, there was three disbeliefs. Moses is one, God's two contingencies. What do we find? We find that this is the first time that it says that the people believed. But there's two more times that we find that the people believed, and it's not just here. The second time is later on at the splitting of the Red Sea. At the end of it, it says they believed in God and in Moses his servant. That was the second time. This is the first time they believed at the end of the sixth reading, and then at the splitting of the Red Sea, after it finished, and they saw the miracle that happened there, they believed in God and in Moses, his servant. Finally, at the giving of the Torah, Mount Sinai, it also says that they believed. When God came down, because this was the whole purpose, to bring the Torah down. So when God is about to prepare everyone for what's going to happen, he promises Moses that they will also believe in you forever. Meaning, the fact that they'll see this, or not see, but experience this prophecy of receiving the Torah, right? The receiving of the Torah was not exactly that, a spaceship landed and brought out a book. It's that they all had the same prophecy of the 10 Commandments. The fact that they had this prophecy together, that they experienced it together, they experienced what Moses was experiencing the whole time. So this made them believe, but not just believe in the verity of the Torah. It made them believe in the verity of Moses' prophecy. Because after that, none of them were at the same level as Moses. Moses continued to be at his level, and the people then returned to being, I guess, regular people to some extent. But they had participated in what Moses had been experiencing all along. So these three statements of faith are actually the antidotes to the disbelief that Moses was sure that they would have, and the two contingent disbeliefs that the Almighty was afraid of, that they might also happen. So what do we have here? We have here a classic case of what the Baal Shem Tov calls submission, separation, and sweetening. The first one, they prostrate themselves when they hear. It's a belief of submission. They submit to the fact that they're accepting this. What Moses is saying, that there's going to be compassion within what they've experienced all along. But they have to bow down when this happens. And they bow down because it's an act of submission. It's belief that causes submission. The second belief happened at the splitting of the Red Sea. That is obviously separation. It's connected separation, but it's much more than that. Because it says that they believed in God and in Moses, his servant. They didn't believe in Moses, his servant, just because Moses is Moses. They believed in him because they had seen that what he was talking about in Egypt was true. There is compassion. They understood this. They understood that Moses is, let's call it, a force in the world. What until now they had experienced only as God's anger, punishment, judgment, whatever it was. Suddenly they saw, wait a minute, this can completely turn around. It can become judgment on the Egyptians, on the one who have been making us suffer for so long. And now suddenly we see them drowned, and we understand that there's also compassion on the one who's suffering. We understand this now. That's the separation. They connect to godliness, to this inner aspect of godliness that they have not experienced until now. And finally, at the giving of the Torah, they reached the level of sweetening. And the sweetening there is, as God says to Moses, they will believe in you forever. What does it mean that they will believe in you forever? Moses is not around. What does it mean for me to believe in him? I don't believe in Moses in the sense that Moses is going to come and do something. I believe in the prophecy of Moses. I believe in what he brought down. I believe in the verity of the Torah that he brought down. That the Torah is a Torah of compassion. That the Torah is a Torah that can guide humanity. That's what it means that they will believe in you forever. That's the sweetening. And the sweetening also of what Moses started out with. That he felt that there would be disbelief. Sweetening here means something amazing. That the Jewish people, for the last 3,300 years, have been debating with the Torah. It's not a simple thing of just accepting it. Yes, we accept it. But we continue to debate over its meaning. The Torah stays, the text remains. The text is considered sacred. But we've been able to somehow balance the belief in the text with the ability to think clearly and openly about it. And that is what really makes it sweetened. Because there needs to be some disbelief. There needs to be some disbelief, some aspect of what we call doubt. Doubt in my understanding. Doubt if I've fully comprehended what it means. And when I'm able to take that doubt and use it in the right way, in order to struggle with the meaning of the text, That's what it means that Moses is here in every generation, as it were, clarifying the meaning of the text, what the text is driving at. And it's as if Moses is with us in every single generation, and that's the meaning of, and they will believe in you forever. Thanks for joining. Hope to see you tomorrow.